Okay, let's unpack this. We are about to tackle really the question that has haunted philosophers, neuroscientists, and, well, poets for centuries. What is the mind?
Right. We're talking about consciousness itself.
The actual feel of red, the taste of coffee, that profound sense of self. It's a puzzle, isn't it? It's resisted every attempt at a solution, and it leads to this frustrating cycle of debate.
That cycle is painfully evident.
Mm.
I mean, one generation gets completely fixated on the subjective, the qualitative experience, what philosophers call qualia.
And then the next generation, they're eager for scientific respectability, so they just throw all that out.
They do. They insist the mind is just a physical function, like a computer program.
Mm.
But then they realize, wait, we've lost the content, the meaning of thought, and, the cycle just starts all over again. Descartes wrestled with it. Functionalists tried to banish it. But the core issue, the hard problem of consciousness, it just persists.
And that persistence suggests that the problem isn't a lack of information. It's not like we just haven't found the right neurobiological data yet. Yeah. It suggests we're reading the map upside down. So our mission today is not to find a new corner of the brain lighting up on an fMRI. Our mission is to find the right framework.
The right conceptual structure, yes.
Mm-hmm.
The framework to make sense of all the data we already have.
Right.
We are stepping back to the most fundamental level and asking, what is the world made of? I mean, what is the best possible assessment of reality, the ontology that we can design?
The idea being, if we get the ontology right,
then the mind might just fit into the cosmic structure effortlessly, without any mystery.
So we are building a philosophical framework from the ground up. We're borrowing insights from seemingly incompatible figures like Locke, who obsessed over qualities, Russell, who explored neutral monism,
and even Wittgenstein, who, studied how we use language to classify reality.
Yeah.
We're really rolling up our sleeves to explore an ontology, one that's heavily influenced by the work of C.B. Martin, to create a truly unifying account.
And for you, the listener, the critical insight to hold on to here is this. If your current conceptual framework can't bridge the gap between measurable physical data and subjective qualitative experience,
then no amount of empirical discovery is going to help you. You'll just find more facts you can't explain. We're seeking the conceptual lens that precedes and supports our understanding of every single piece of data.
So we start with the world. I mean, before we even talk about neurons or experiences, we have to talk about what exists. Why is getting this metaphysical groundwork right so vital before we even get to the mind?
Well, because if the foundational assumptions of your framework are flawed, everything you build on top of it is just structurally unsound. For decades, philosophers of mind have maybe implicitly accepted an ontology that splits the world into two kinds of stuff.
You have the measurable dispositional stuff on one side.
That's physics.
And then everything else, the qualities, the feelings on the other.
And once you start with that split, the mind becomes this inexplicable mystery. It's a ghost in the machine.
I get the danger of the split, but, why can't we just trust the scientific method to deliver the ontology? I mean, surely modern physics tells us what's real.
Science is invaluable, of course. It tells us about the structure and behavior of reality. But it necessarily describes the world using methods that focus on what is measurable and repeatable.
Right. So a physicist describes an electron, they're talking about its charge, its mass, its spin.
Its dispositionalities, its causal powers. They're completely silent on the electron's intrinsic nature, its quality. And this silence is methodological, you see. It's not ontological.
Okay. So if we rely only on empirical data from a framework that privileges measurable power over intrinsic quality, we risk confusing a lack of description for a lack of existence.
Exactly. Our sources argue that the test of a successful ontology is its ability to plot claims from all the sciences, physics, biology, psychology, onto a single, sensible, consistent map.
So you need a concept of reality that's powerful enough to comport with both quantum mechanics and common sense.
And which doesn't leave the mind dangling as some kind of arbitrary add-on.
That sounds like a monumental task. Let's start with the simplest building blocks.
Okay, so the world, at its most basic, is objects bearing spatial and temporal relations. We assume there are simple objects.
Objects that are not made up of other objects.
Right. These ground the existence of everything else.
Why is that assumption so necessary?
Well, it's to avoid the problem of infinite regress. If every object were composed of smaller objects, and those were composed of even smaller ones, ad infinitum.
You'd get this vertiginous feeling of endless parts, but no fundamental reality to ground it all.
You would. Simple objects, by definition, stop that regress. They are the ultimate bearers.
Okay, so objects are the bearers. Now, what do they bear? Properties.
Yes. And properties, the redness, the hardness, the charge. This is where we introduce the first really radical departure from traditional metaphysics. We insist that a property is not a part of the object. It's not a slice of the pie.
So a property is simply...
A way the ball is.
That seems like a subtle distinction, but I'm guessing it has massive implications for that famous one-over-many puzzle.
It does. I mean, that's the puzzle that gave rise to the whole idea of universals. If you see a red billiard ball and a red warning flag, why are they both red?
The traditional answer from, say, Plato or Aristotle was that they share a single entity called redness.
Which exists either transcendentally for Plato or is somehow wholly present within both objects for Aristotle.
That sounds incredibly mysterious. The idea that a single thing, redness, can be wholly present in a billiard ball on my desk and a flag in Beijing and be numerically the same thing.
It creates deep philosophical problems about location and instantiation. So our solution is to reject universals entirely.
And instead, we use the concept of tropes.
Exactly. A trope is a particularized property. The redness of that billiard ball on your desk is a numerically distinct thing, a unique instance from the redness of the warning flag.
Okay, so we're saying the redness of the ball is distinct from the redness of the flag. If they are numerically distinct, why do we call them both red?
Because they share membership in a class of objects that possess exactly resembling properties or tropes. And the key point, you have to get this, is that the resemblance itself is intrinsic and primitive.
It's built into the nature of the tropes themselves.
Yes. We don't need a separate abstract entity, the universal redness, to ground their resemblance. The resemblance is the grounding fact.
Let me try to put that into plain English. For myself and for you listening, if I have two identical copies of a rare coin, they are both rare coins, but they are two distinct objects. They're similar because their features intrinsically match.
Right.
So tropes are saying that the features themselves, the specific shape, the specific color, are also unique particular entities, but they share a primitive built-in similarity relation with other matching features.
Precisely. You don't need an abstract universal coinness floating above them to explain why they're similar. Their similarity is just a fundamental fact about them. And this allows us to be property realists. We accept that redness is a concrete feature of the world without all the metaphysical baggage of Platonic universals.
Okay, so once we have simple objects bearing tropes, we build complex objects, rocks, trees, people. But here we have to confront this really popular notion of the layered world.
Oh, this layered view is immensely popular, especially in academic circles. It suggests that while higher levels like biology or psychology are made up of lower levels, like physics.
The higher levels are governed by their own distinct autonomous laws.
Right. The higher level supervenes on the lower level, which means the arrangement of the physical particles is enough for the higher level event to happen. But the higher level is governed by specialized laws, often called ceteris paribus laws.
What exactly are ceteris paribus laws?
Ceteris paribus just means all else being equal. It's kind of caveat you see in the special sciences like economics or psychology, because their laws aren't perfectly universal like in physics.
Okay, give me an example.
A law in psychology might state, if a person desires X and believes Y is the way to get X, ceteris paribus, they will try to do Y.
So the all else being equal clause acknowledges that, a sudden brain seizure or a loud noise might interfere.
It shields the law from being falsified by the messiness of physical reality. And the layered worldview uses these laws to argue that chemistry and biology are distinct ontological layers, even if they're physically made of basic particles.
But our proposed ontology rejects this multiplication of entities. Why?
We reject the whole notion that complex objects are something over and above the collection of simple objects that compose them. The classic example is the statue analogy.
Right. Traditional philosophy says the statue is distinct from the clay because they have different persistence conditions. If you grind the statue into dust, you destroy the statue, but the clay particles are still there.
Therefore, they must be two spatially overlapping but ontologically distinct objects.
Okay, now, I, as the skeptical listener, would challenge that immediately. I mean, surely the meaning and the history of the statue add a distinct layer that isn't just reducible to the particles. Why does this ontology insist on being so austere?
Austerity is the price of coherence. I mean, if you allow for autonomous ontological layers, you immediately run into problems of causal completeness. If physics is causally complete, where does the causal power of the statue's distinct layer even come from?
So if we're serious about composition,
We have to see the statue as what we call a relaxed collection.
a relaxed collection, explain that thoroughly.
The statue is nothing over and above the collection of simpler objects, but we take the term collection in a relaxed sense. It can gain or lose members and still count as the same collection.
Like a sports team roster, it's the same team even if players change over the seasons.
A perfect analogy. But we have to add two crucial things to define that collection: the appropriate complex arrangement and the necessary causal history.
So for a statue, the arrangement is the specific shape, and the causal history includes being fashioned by an artist with the intent to create art. But ontologically, it's still just the particles, arranged and historied.
Exactly. When God creates the world, he doesn't need to create the particles and then create the statue entity. He just creates the simple particles and makes sure they bear the right relations to one another, including historical ones. The statue exists, but only in the ontologically innocuous sense that it is a complex arrangement of simpler stuff.
This has profound implications for every special science. Let's take that analogy to a higher level, a corporation or a nation. Is a nation a distinct ontological layer?
Or is it a relaxed collection of citizens, infrastructure, documents, and their complex historical and social arrangements?
Our ontology insists it's the latter.
It has to be. The distinctions we make in fields like sociology, biology, and economics are descriptive practices. They're useful predicates for grouping complex arrangements, but they are not necessarily distinct ontological layers.
So the world isn't layered, our description of it is. We have to avoid reading our linguistic tools back into the world as metaphysical strata.
And this compositional picture holds true for properties too. Complex properties, like being edible or being alive, are merely novel combinations of simple properties. There's no genuine emergence at the complex level.
So when a new chemical compound is formed, its properties are just novel combinations of the simple properties of its constituent atoms.
They're not genuinely new, simple properties created out of thin air.
But you mentioned the possibility of genuine emergence earlier, using the term touch particle. Can you elaborate on that?
Right. If genuine emergence, the creation of a truly new, simple property occurs, it has to happen at the basic level. Imagine a high-energy collision in particle physics that yields a new, previously unknown elementary particle, a hypothetical touch particle.
Okay.
If the astute particle possesses a property that is not a combination or manifestation of any pre-existing simple properties, that would be genuine emergence.
So we're not ruling out emergence entirely, but we're restricting it to the most fundamental level of reality. This ensures that if anything truly new exists, it's integrated at the base layer.
And that prevents autonomous, causally mysterious layers from just popping up higher up, like in psychology or biology. It keeps the ontology unified. Whether we're looking at a Kimmer particle or a complex thought, we are dealing with properties that have to conform to the same basic structural rules of existence.
We've established tropes and the anti-layered world. Now we arrive at the core idea, the thing that underpins the solution to the hard problem. We need to unify the two aspects of reality that science and common sense have pulled apart: function and feeling.
This is the central, non-negotiable axiom of this whole ontology. Every single property, the spin of an electron, the redness of a trope, the structure of a molecule, has a dual nature.
It necessarily endows its possessor with both the particular disposition causal power
And a particular quality.
This is truly radical. I mean, philosophers have traditionally separated properties into two camps. Purely dispositional properties, like fragility or solubility, defined only by what they do.
And purely categorical or qualitative properties like being square or being red, which are defined by what they are right now.
And you're collapsing that distinction entirely.
We have to collapse it. That distinction is the source of the mind-body problem. If matter is purely dispositional, just causal powers, and consciousness is purely qualitative, just intrinsic feeling, then you have two worlds that can never meet.
Our ontology insists they are the same property.
Yes.
But surely the structure of a vase, its categorical shape, is distinct from its disposition to shatter when it's dropped.
Let's examine that structure more closely.
Right.
If a property is truly categorical, purely qualitative, defined only by what it is, it would be causally inert. It would just sit there.
It would have no power.
But if you describe the molecular structure of that vase, you are already describing its dispositionality. That specific structure disposes the vase to reflect light, it disposes it to maintain rigidity, and it disposes it to shatter under a certain force.
Ah, I see. So the structure is the disposition. It's what makes the vase ready for certain interactions.
Exactly. Even simple objects must possess dispositionalities. the capacity to engage in interactions they aren't currently engaging in. Dispositionality is fundamental to existence.
And the qualitative aspect is equally fundamental.
You can't have a world of objects forever poised to act, but never actually being anything.
Let's use a concrete analogy. Think about a charged battery.
Perfect example. How do you describe the property of being charged?
Mm-hmm.
You can describe it in terms of its causal power. It's disposed to produce a current when you connect it to a circuit. That's its disposition.
But that charge also has an intrinsic measurable state, a certain electrochemical configuration.
That configuration is its quality, its categorical way of being.
And the key insight here is that the causal power and the intrinsic state are not two properties linked by some law.
They are the self-same property, just differently considered.
Inseparable in reality.
Right. This is what Locke called partial consideration. Think of that famous ambiguous visual figure, the one that can be an old lady or a young woman. You're looking at the same arrangement of lines. The lines don't change. But you can shift your attention and see one image or the other.
So we're mentally separating the property's intrinsic readiness to manifest its dispositionality from the way it is right now, its quality. And this applies universally from the hum of an atom to the taste of sugar.
The taste of sugar is both a specific qualitative experience and the disposition to trigger certain neural pathways and metabolic responses. This unification of quality and power is the ontological lever we need. It means there is no property in the universe, no matter how simple or complex, that is purely function without intrinsic quality.
Okay, so if every property is defined by its inherent power, then we have to fundamentally rewrite the rules of causality. The traditional Humean model says cause A precedes effect B, linked by repeated observation.
But if power is intrinsic and simultaneous, that model breaks down.
Right.
The Humean model creates artificial problems. First, the temporal gap. How can a completed past event influence the present? And second, it forces these arbitrary distinctions between causes and background conditions.
So we replace the linear successive chain with what?
With a comprehensive dispositional network, which C.B. Martin called a power net. This power net insists that causal truths are grounded in the mutual manifestations of reciprocal disposition partners.
And the events are simultaneous or overlapping?
Precisely. Let's take a simple example. Pushing a heavy box. In the Humean view, my muscle contraction causes the pushing, which then causes the movement, maybe in discrete moments.
But in the PowerNet model,
the pushing and the moving are simultaneous. They are the mutual manifestation of my physical disposition to push and the box's disposition to resist and then move under force.
This means we stop looking for linear single causes. We look for a web of necessary mutual partners.
Think about a match igniting. Traditionally, we isolate the striking action as the cause. We relegate the presence of oxygen, the striking surface's friction, and the match's chemical makeup to mere background conditions.
Which is completely arbitrary.
Totally arbitrary. The igniting is the mutual manifestation of all those reciprocal partners. The match's chemical readiness, the friction's surface disposition, and the oxygen's disposition to support combustion.
In the PowerNet, all the factors get equal credit. It's like two playing cards leaning against each other. Neither one is the exclusive cause of the structure standing. The standing is the simultaneous mutual manifestation of their reciprocal dispositions.
This grounds causality in the properties themselves. It makes it an intrinsic, necessary transaction rather than some mysterious extrinsic link between discrete events.
Now, what about probability? If properties are definite, how do we explain quantum randomness, or even something simpler, like a chemical reaction that only succeeds 60% of the time?
Right. This is where we have to address apparent probabilistic causation. Our sources theorize that in cases where property C causes event E 60% of the time and F 40% of the time, the solution isn't to say the transaction itself is random.
That's philosophically unsatisfying.
It is. Instead, we propose that the basic properties, Texiphronon and Text2 themselves, might be oscillatory.
Oscillatory?
Yeah.
You mean the property flips its definite character?
Yes. Within its fixed nature, it oscillates between two slightly different dispositional states, Texiphronon and Text2, at a set intrinsic ratio, say 6:4. Text2 is disposed to cause E, and Text2 is disposed to cause F. The property itself is perfectly definite in its disposition at any given moment, but it's built into its nature to oscillate.
Wow. That shifts the locus of probability from the moment of transaction, where we'd have to accept that the very same properties manifest differently for no reason, to the intrinsic structural oscillation of the property itself.
It maintains the definiteness of reality while still accounting for probability. It's just less surprising to assume a property is built to oscillate than to assume a property can arbitrarily change its output.
So that completes our foundational framework. Tropes, anti-layered collections, the dual nature of properties, and the power net of causality.
This new cosmic blueprint is now ready to tackle the mind.
That was a rigorous journey through metaphysics, but now we get to the payoff. We've established that everything in the universe is intrinsically both qualitative and dispositional. So if every particle, arrangement, and interaction follows this rule, what does this new cosmic blueprint do to the old functionalist nightmares about pain, zombies, and the mysterious feel of consciousness? Let's start with that functionalist challenge.
Functionalism, for decades, has been defined by the concept of multiple realizability, or MR. The idea is that a mental property like pain, text emprin, is defined by its functional role-causing withdrawal, informing you of damage, and so on.
And it can be realized by different neurological properties in different creatures, human C fibers, octopus nervous systems, or maybe even advanced silicon.
But the moment functionalists established pain as this higher-level property, realized by distinct lower-level properties, they created a classic dilemma.
A fatal one.
Yes, the functionalist dilemma, which we showed in the diagrams, is fatal. If the physical realizer causes the next physical state, taking an aspirin, then what is the mental property textin doing?
It seems causally inert. It's epiphenomenal, just a useless byproduct floating above the causal chain.
And if you insist texamdolan does cause textamdolan, you get causal overdetermination.
Yeah.
Text 1 already did the job, making the mental property redundant.
So if the dual nature of properties solved our foundational metaphysical problems, how does it dismantle this one?
We have to reject the foundational premise. The premise that the predicate is in pain designates a single generic property, whether that property is high level or low level.
Whoa, wait, if I say the man is in pain, that sentence is true. Doesn't that linguistic truth demand an ontological property, pain? That makes it true. I mean, aren't you just denying that pain exists?
Not at all. Pain undeniably exists. But remember our lesson from part 1 with the statue and the stone. The predicate is a stone does not name a single, simple property. It names a complex arrangement of particles that exhibit certain salient features, hardness, permanence, things like that.
Okay, so we apply the same logic to pain.
We do. We say that creatures are in pain not because they share one generic property of pain, but because they possess a range of distinct complex neurological properties, text octopus, etc.
And those properties exhibit a family resemblance.
Yes. They're similar enough in their salient dispositional roles, causing withdrawal, signaling damage, creating negative affect.
So multiple realizability is misnamed. It's not a relation among properties where a single abstract property gets instantiated differently.
It's just the linguistic phenomenon of applying a single predicate, pain, to objects that possess distinct, complex properties that are sufficiently similar in function. The predicate is in pain is a pragmatic tool for classification, not a label for a fundamental ontological unit.
And this just instantaneously avoids the epiphenomenalism problem.
Completely.
Yeah.
Since there is no singular higher-level pain property to be realized, there's nothing to be causally sidelined. The only things that exist are the distinct neurological properties. And since those properties are already intrinsically dispositional and qualitative, thanks to part 2, they are inherently causally potent.
With the functionalist dilemma solved, we move to the final boss of consciousness philosophy, the philosophical zombie.
Ah, zombie.
The zombie is physically identical to you atom for atom, state for state, but it lacks any subjective conscious experience. The traditional argument is that if this zombie is logically possible, then consciousness is a contingent add-on to physics governed by arbitrary natural laws. And that contingency is what makes the hard problem so hard.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the ontology we've built makes the zombie flat out impossible. It is not logically or metaphysically conceivable.
That is a bold claim. How does our dual nature axiom make the zombie impossible?
Well, the whole zombie thesis relies on separating physical structure disposition from conscious experience quality. It assumes you can have one without the other.
But our ontology established that every property is necessarily both dispositional and qualitative.
They are the selfsame property, just differently considered.
So if a world contains the exact same neurological properties as ours, the same textual other, it must, by metaphysical necessity, contain the exact same qualities.
The qualities of conscious experience aren't tacked on by some contingent natural law. They are built into the properties that constitute our mental life. The neurological states are the qualities. The only way to imagine a zombie is to fail to grasp the intrinsic nature of the physical stuff itself.
The hard problem evaporates when you realize the qualities of experience aren't extra features, but the intrinsic qualitative nature of the neurological properties themselves.
Exactly.
And this is why you reject the term materialist and prefer neutral monism.
Yes, materialism carries the baggage of assuming a fundamental chasm between the physical, which we think of as cold, colorless, dispositional stuff, and the mental, warm, felt, qualitative stuff.
Neutral monism denies that chasm.
It does. Following figures like Russell and Lockwood, it argues that the fundamental stuff of the universe is neither purely mental nor purely material, but some neutral stuff that possesses both dispositional and qualitative aspects.
So the stuff that makes up my brain is the same kind of stuff that makes up the moon, just arranged differently. And because that stuff is intrinsically qualitative, the arrangement in my brain, my neurological state, has a subjective feeling, while the arrangement in the moon has qualities we simply cannot access or experience.
Exactly. We sidestep the impossible question of trying to explain how cold, dead matter creates consciousness by simply saying the matter was never cold and dead in the first place. Everything that exists has qualities.
Okay, if my experiences are states of the brain, and the qualities I experience are neurological qualities, then we have to solve the observation confusion. Why does a neuroscientist observing my brain see nothing resembling my experience of, say, a red round tomato? They just see spongy, gray matter.
This is a profound and common error. It comes from confusing three distinct sets of qualities. We need to dissect this very carefully.
Okay, let's start with the external object.
Set 1. The qualities of the external object, the tomato, its redness, its roundness, its texture, these are real, objective features of the tomato.
Okay, set 2. The qualities of my internal visual experience of the tomato.
Right. These are the qualities you encounter when you shift your attention from the external tomato to your awareness of the tomato. They're hard to describe because we usually treat them as transparent indicators of the external object.
Like looking through a clean window pane at a garden. You're aware of the garden, not the glass itself.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
The experience is like the glass pane. It's necessary for perception, but usually ignored. Those qualities, the feel of seeing red, are the neurological qualities of your brain state.
And then set 3 is the neuroscientist's visual experience.
The neuroscientist looking at your brain is undergoing an entirely different experience. They see spongy gray tissue. They're looking at the surface of your brain state. There is absolutely no reason why the qualities of the neuroscientist's visual experience, set 3, should qualitatively resemble your neurological qualities of seeing red, set 2.
This is a crucial distinction. A neuroscientist's observation is just an indirect awareness of the neurological activity. They are perceiving the brain state externally through their own separate sensory apparatus.
Whereas your experience is the neurological activity itself. If we accept neutral monism, the qualities of your experiences are neurological qualities. And here's the radical takeaway. These are the only material qualities with which you are directly acquainted.
I am directly being the state.
Yes. Your acquaintance with the qualities of the external world, the redness of the tomato, is causally indirect, mediated by your senses and brain states.
So the age-old philosophical puzzle of how consciousness could possibly be material qualities is only a puzzle if you confuse the qualities of a brain observed with the qualities of a brain state experienced. We are directly acquainted with the qualitative nature of matter, but only in the form of our own brain states.
This direct acquaintance naturally leads to the intuition of privacy and privileged access, the feeling that only you can know your mental state. And this often leads to the idea of incorrigibility, the belief that error about your own states is impossible.
This intuition of privacy feels deeply ingrained. I can be mistaken about whether there's water in a cup, but I feel like I cannot be mistaken about whether I'm currently experiencing pain.
Well, this intuition stems from a poor conceptual model of self-awareness. The model we have to reject is the Cartesian idea of an inner observer sensing an internal object. That makes awareness sound like just another act of perception, directed inward.
But if we reject the inner observer, how do we explain the privacy?
The privacy is explained by the fundamental distinction we just used. The distinction between being in a state and observing a state. Your awareness of pain is constituted by your being in that state. If directly observing a pain simply means having that pain, then only you can directly observe your pain.
It's a necessary logical truth, not a mysterious metaphysical barrier. It's no more mystical than saying only the chair can bear the property of being sat upon by me.
But this refined view, which separates the state from the judgment about the state, still allows for the theoretical possibility of error. If my judgment, I am in pain, is distinct from the experience of pain, I could technically misjudge it. Maybe I call it nausea.
So why does it feel so incorrigible? Why is error so unlikely?
Because of the structure of the causal chain in conscious experience. In conscious states, the content or object of the judgment, I am in pain, and the proximal cause of that judgment, the experience of pain, are one and the same event. They are identical.
Okay, let's compare that to external perception. If I see a billiard ball, the actual billiard ball causes my sensory experience, and that experience then causes my judgment. That is round and red. There are two causal steps between the real object and my judgment.
And that gap allows for error, hallucination, illusion, misinterpretation. But when you are judging your own pain, the object of the judgment is the experience, which is the immediate proximal cause of the judgment. The closer the object of the judgment is to its proximal cause, the less likely the error. And this explains that strong, compelling conviction of incorrigibility without resorting to the philosophical claim that error is impossible.
We have solved quality and privacy. The last major piece is intentionality, the ofness and aboutness of thought. When I think of a red squirrel, my thought is about the squirrel. We're moving beyond linguistic beliefs and desires to focus on something functionalists often neglected. Mental imagery.
Imagery, visual, verbal, sensory, is a fundamental non-propositional form of intentionality. To deny imagery is a distortion, probably driven by the functionalist fear of the qualitative aspect of mind. Since our ontology embraces qualities, we can embrace imagery.
So if I visualize a red squirrel, am I scrutinizing a little picture in my head? The picture in the head model seems deeply flawed.
It is flawed. Having a visual image of a red squirrel is not scrutinizing an inner object. It is undergoing a state that qualitatively resembles the state of perceiving a red squirrel. The brain is engaging the same kind of neurological properties, the qualities that are involved in actual perception, just driven internally.
Even abstract linguistic thought involves internal verbal imagery. We feel ourselves uttering the words in our minds.
And this imagery is central to intelligent commerce with the world because it is the basis for anticipatory action. The chess player simulating a move, the architect visualizing a beam stress, the athlete maneuvering, they all rely on internal, qualitatively rich simulations that mimic reality.
This crucial role of imagery allows us to challenge the prevailing theory of mental content. Causal externalism.
Putnam's twin earth.
Right. Twin earth argued that meaning just ain't in the head. My thought of water refers to text here on Earth, while my physically identical twin's thought of water, or twatter, refers to text YZ on twin Earth. So since our internal states are identical, but our meanings differ, meaning must depend on external causal relations.
We need an internalist competitor that respects the dual nature of properties. We can use the dart tossing analogy. Imagine a thought's intentional aim, its intrinsic projective character, is internal, determined by the creature's complex dispositional brain state. It is agent-centered.
The thrower determines the trajectory, the aim.
Exactly. What the thought hits its content, the target, depends on external circumstances. My thought and my twin's thought have intrinsically indiscernible aims because they have identical neurological states.
But because I live in a text environment and he lives in a text YZ environment.
My intrinsic aim reliably hits text 2 and his hits text YZ.
So the difference in content is explained by the external environment acting as the target. But the source of intentionality, the aim or projectivity, is intrinsic to the brain state.
And that projectivity itself is dispositionally grounded. It's built into every property's fundamental dispositionality, the capacity to be directed to or selective for manifestations of a certain kind. Our complex, focused mental states are just the most sophisticated examples of this intrinsic dispositionality.
And this brings us back to the qualitative nature. Unlike pure functionalism, which only cares about the causal role, we see that the qualities of the imagistic thought, its resemblance to perceptual experience, are what suit it to play its role.
The specific feel of visualizing a squirrel is what makes it an apt, reliable simulation for planning action. The quality isn't just an irrelevant byproduct, it's essential to the function. We interact with the world because of what's outside us, but the capacity for sophisticated, aimed thought is intrinsic, dispositionally grounded, and would exist even in a hallucinating world where the external targets were absent. That is the internalist foundation provided by this ontology.
We have built a comprehensive metaphysical system. Objects are relaxed collections, properties are particularized ways that are intrinsically qualitative and dispositional, and causality is a simultaneous power net. Let's summarize how this framework fundamentally changes the landscape of the four major conflicts in philosophy of mind.
First, dualism. Dualism correctly intuited the distinct qualitative nature of experience and the privacy of the mind.
But our ontology strips away the mystery.
It does, by explaining that privacy is merely an epistemological asymmetry being versus observing a state. And the qualities are not non-material. They are neurological qualities, the inherent qualitative side of the dispositional brain state. We're materialists, or neutral monists, about qualities.
Second, the old identity theory. It was right that mental properties aren't distinct from material ones.
But it was fatally wrong because it assumed predicates like is in pain designated a single, simple neurological property only to be refuted by multiple realizability.
Our framework keeps the identity thesis at the level of the specific neurological state, which is the experience, but denies that the linguistic term pain maps onto a single property.
Third, functionalism. Functionalism correctly fixated on the dispositional nature and causal role of the mind, which is central to our power net concept. But it was crippled by ignoring the qualitative nature of properties. It assumed the matter was purely dispositional and therefore failed to account for consciousness.
Our system shows that functional systems need qualities, which are dispositionally grounded, to occupy their roles appropriately, especially for things like anticipatory imagery.
And finally, interpretationism, like Davidson's theory. These theories capture the reflective, rational facet of human thought by interpreting linguistic behavior, but they are entirely silent on the fundamental non-linguistic imagistic thinking that must precede and support those reflective abilities.
You need the dispositional and qualitative groundwork of mental imagery for creatures to even possess the complexity required to engage in the kind of rational choice that interpretationism seeks to explain.
In short, the crisis over consciousness stems not from insufficient data, but from accepting a flawed ontology where qualities were exiled from the physical world. By adopting the correct conceptual framework, neutral monism, we are realists about mind, body, causation, and qualities without succumbing to any of the classic pitfalls.
When we started, you mentioned that philosophical theories cycle endlessly, trying to reconcile qualities, science, and content. It seems the reason for this cycle is that philosophers were trying to explain a feature of reality qualities that they had already, philosophically, assumed did not exist in the fundamental building blocks of the world.
What's fascinating here is that the crisis over consciousness evaporates when we realize that physics' silence on qualities proves nothing about the world's actual nature. Physics focuses on dispositionalities because they're numerical, structural, and measurable. But if every single property, down to the most basic Shandy particle, has qualities, then it is no mystery that states of mind do.
We simply need to stop confusing our limited, measurement-focused description of the physical world with the entirety of its intrinsic nature.
Exactly. That's it.
That is a staggering conclusion. The most vexing mystery in consciousness is solved by starting over and redefining the simplest components of reality itself.
Indeed. And the unifying theme throughout this deep dive has been that the way we categorize things, the predicates we use, like is a stone or is in pain, don't necessarily map cleanly onto the fundamental properties of reality. They're often just incredibly useful linguistic tools for classifying similar enough clusters of complex properties and their arrangements.
This raises an important question for you, the listener, to mull over. We've used this ontological insight, the relaxed collection and the rejection of autonomous layers, to resolve conflicts about the mind and basic objects like statues. But if our common language predicates are often just tools for classifying similar enough clusters of complex properties, how much of what we accept as truly distinct autonomous realities in fields outside of the mind, think about institutions like sociology, economics, or even history, might also just be a sophisticated collection of simple objects and their similar arrangements?
If statues are relaxed collections of particles in causal history, what then is a nation, a market, or a social class? Are these truly distinct autonomous layers of reality governed by unique, non-reducible laws?
Or are they just extraordinarily complex yet ultimately reducible collections of human bodies, their dispositional interactions, and their historical arrangements? It seems like the deepest dive into the mind required us to dive into the very fabric of everything else first. Think about that the next time you hear a news report about the market or look up at a statue. Are you looking at a distinct entity or just an incredibly complex yet unified arrangement of the same stuff that makes up your own consciousness?